Hello, fiendlings. How the hell are ya? I spent 9 days in Costa Rica for rest, relaxation, and the vacation my wife is always telling me I need to take. As such, I didn't have intros for the last couple of episodes. Sorry about that. I'll most likely write an essay or two about my time there, but the biggest highlight for me came on night 2 in Tortuguero. Guides led us onto the beach 2 hours after nightfall, and we walked half a mile down the beach before coming upon a giant sea turtle nesting area. We weren't allowed to take pictures, the white lights disturbed the massive reptiles, so we had to view the scene through the beams of red lights. What did we see? A sea turtle digging its nest and laying its eggs. The pearl-like eggs slowly filled the chamber, the light sparkling off their glistening shells, while the turtle occasionally moved its massive flippers. The guides then led us to another turtle that was finishing covering its egg chambers and refilling the hole. We watched the turtle through the red lights as it swept one last flipper full of dirt across its nest and slowly turned itself around. Some 100 feet from the ocean, the 3-foot diameter turtle used its flippers in bursts, while taking up to 30 seconds before the next move. Exhausted from her efforts, the turtle barely managed to reach the water-drenched sand. Another wave came by, and when it was gone, so was the turtle. Despite the punishing heat, the storm threatening to unload itself atop us, and the stumble through flashlight-lit jungle paths, it was an amazing experience. I don't think I stopped smiling all night. Another highlight was the town of Monteverde and the cloud forest, but that's an anecdote for another day. Now it's time to turn to more dangerous forms of ocean life. Sacculina, for instance. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 8, Sacculina. Chapter 8. Nicholas deposited them at the main house for lunch a few hours later. Bill was thankful, especially after Autumn returned from her swim naked. Although Nicholas and Angelo set her up with an umbrella and lounge chair, she didn't bother dressing again until it was time for lunch. Bill then understood what Ellen meant when she pointed out Russ had been wearing clothes for once. Nudists. They were in the company of nudists. Did that mean Russ was swimming naked when they encountered the crab? Where did it bite him? He wondered absently. The thought of a slimy, wriggling thing chomping on his dick entered his mind, and he instantly shivered. That was almost too nasty to consider. Didn't matter, though. It was Russ's problem. The only question he had was whether or not Ellen had been bitten. After all, she'd been even closer to the things. Maybe they couldn't get through her swimsuit, and that was why she hadn't been munched. Shit, he thought. I could have met those things. Maybe another crab exploded, and maybe he'd been bitten when he hit the fire coral? Or after? He'd been in blinding pain and wouldn't have noticed if a clown had suddenly appeared before him. He pushed the memory away while he ate. Ellen talked with Russ, who was directly across from her, while Autumn and Bill occasionally looked at one another or commented. Russ and Ellen seemed to have hit it off in some way he didn't understand. Jealous? Good question. Did he have a reason to be? Apart from the fact Russ was in much better shape, sculpted, in fact, and made more money than Bill could ever hope to pull down, plenty to be jealous of. But his wife? Fucking around with Russ? Was that even fair to consider? Of course it was. He'd been working non-stop for what seemed like years, but it had only been months. In the last 2 hell weeks, he'd worked 20-hour days and crashed at a hotel near the office. The weekends weren't much better. She had tried to seduce him multiple times, and he'd been unable to muster the energy. Had she thought he was having an affair? Could he blame her if she did? The worst, he knew, was the silence. He'd barely been able to talk about his feelings, much less his emotional state, during the project. And any time she tried to connect with him, he'd been irritable and out of sorts. He'd been an asshole. As he finished his meal, Ellen and Russ were both ordering seconds. Autumn put her hands on the table. "What is with you two?" she asked, smiling. Ellen and Russ exchanged a glance before meeting her gaze. "What is what?" Russ asked. "Ordering seconds," she said, and looked at Bill. "Russ had 2 breakfasts this morning." 2? Bill said with genuine surprise. He jerked a thumb at Ellen. 1.5 for her. Ellen raised her hand defensively. "Can't people be hungry?" Bill chuckled darkly. "When did my wife become a hobbit?" She nudged him in the ribs with a nervous smile. "It's that time, remember?" "Oh, right," he said, blushing. When they finished lunch, they remained in the dining room sipping from their drinks. Autumn had already begun the day's drinking with a pina colada, but Russ stuck with iced tea. So did Ellen. Bill knew why he wasn't drinking, the pain pills and antibiotics, but why were Russ and Ellen teetotaling? Russ might have a hangover, but Ellen certainly shouldn't. Why are you being so paranoid? He asked himself. You fucked like bunnies yesterday. That was true enough. They hadn't had that much action in months. What's more, he'd felt loved and thought she did too. So what was he worried about? When Autumn had finished her drink, they broke from the dining room and headed to their bungalows for naps, showers, and whatever else might be in store. When Nicholas dropped them off, Ellen and Bill entered their bungalow to find the bed had been changed and fresh towels in the bathroom. Ellen shook her head. I honestly didn't expect this place to run like a resort. Me neither, Bill said. He stripped off his shirt and shorts and laid down on the bed. He'd taken 2 more pain pills and they were starting to kick in. Drowsy and full, he'd be asleep in no time. You sacking out? Ellen asked as she headed for the bathroom. Yeah, he yawned. Just an hour or 2, I promise. She turned in the doorway and smiled at him. Take as long as you want, baby. Get better. With that, he closed his eyes and drifted away. Autumn sat naked on the bed, playing cards set before her in a game of solitaire. She idly matched up the cards while she waited for Russ to get out of the bathroom. Considering how much he'd been eating, she'd be surprised if he was out soon. She smirked at the cards and nearly shook her head. God, Russ had been laying it on thick. It was clear he wanted to fuck Ellen, and that was fine with Autumn, but chatting her up like that in front of her husband? Does he even know we're swingers? That was the $64 million question. She'd noticed Bill's shock at seeing her naked, but she'd also noticed his gaze drifting over her body from time to time. Perhaps he was attracted to her after all. It wouldn't be the first time she and Russ spouse swapped, but that was usually with other swingers. However, there was always the odd virgin couple looking for a little excitement. In that case, they usually approached Autumn and Russ rather than the other way around. A grin spread over her face as she found another king. Maybe Ellen will be up for a little strange with me. Sighing, she continued playing, occasionally looking over at the closed bathroom door. She hoped Russ would take a shower. He'd smelled awful. She didn't know if it was all the sweat or some other residue from last night's shenanigans, but the unpleasant odor seemed to surround him now. She tried to hint that he should clean up, but she didn't know if he'd understood or not. If he felt well enough to have sex, she'd make damn sure he took a shower first. After placing a 2 on a column, she sighed and thumped the cards with a knuckle. She wished Russ would hurry the hell up. She needed to pee, too, and there was only one toilet in the bungalow. Russ, you shitting out a dwarf in there? He didn't respond at first, but she heard him bump into something in the bathroom. Just give me a minute. She blew out a frustrated sigh, and a card flipped over. Rolling her eyes, she flipped it back and stared at the Suicide King. Whatever, she told the card. Russ! The toilet flushed, followed by the sound of the shower stall door opening. Come on in, I'm going to rinse off. About time, Autumn said, rolling off the bed and onto her feet. Russ's heart was beating too fast. He'd been staring down at his testicles when Autumn called for him. If she saw them, she'd understand the look of concern on his face. His brain, however, wasn't able to process it. Before they'd left to meet Bill and Ellen, he'd had a peek in his shorts and noticed his balls were no longer unnaturally shrunken. Instead, they had plumped up and felt hard to the touch. Whitish, thick hair had sprouted from the skin, marring his otherwise well-manicured nethers. Every now and then, one of his testicles twitched. She couldn't see him like this. Shower. He'd take a shower. He pulled a towel from the rack and hung it over the shower stall door. After opening it, he stepped in, arranged the towel to cover as much of the stall wall as possible, and closed the door. Come on in, I'm going to rinse off. She muttered something he couldn't hear as he turned on the water. He adjusted the spray to an abnormally cool temperature, one that was more comfortable for some reason than the usual hot shower he preferred, and turned his back to the shower stall door. Autumn stepped through the bathroom door and immediately went to the toilet. He turned slightly once he heard her sit, affording her the view of his back through the shower glass. You feeling okay? Autumn asked him. He didn't know at first how to respond to that question. He dipped his head and stared down at his testicles again. The left one twitched several times, the sensation not completely unpleasurable, but certainly worrying. But the white hairs, if that's what they were, seemed to sway by themselves like seagrass in a gentle current. Should say something. Go see the quack. Maybe get airlifted out of here. No, an alien voice said inside his mind. You don't want to do that. No, he didn't. It would ruin the week. It would ruin the chance to have sex with Ellen. God, he wanted that. She smelled so good in a way he couldn't describe, but the memory made him drool. Russ? Autumn called, snapping him out of his thoughts. I'm fine, baby. Just running some cold water on the boys. She sighed again. Honey, just go see the doctor. Make him give you something for it. Maybe. I'm serious, Russ. The toilet flushed, and she dropped the lid a little harder than she had to. Take care of your damned body. Yes, dear, he said, barely able to keep a snarl from his tone. Her voice seemed to have grown shrill and annoying. Her normal falsetto sounded an octave higher, almost like a screech. She put her hand on the shower's door. Want me to inspect the boys? Huh? He said nervously. Not right now. He killed the water and grabbed the towel, quickly wrapping it around his waist as she opened the door. He leaned down to kiss her and suddenly felt disgusted at the idea of her tongue in his mouth. He moved his head to the left and kissed her cheek. Before she could protest, he gently pushed her aside and left the stall. Autumn put her hands on her hips. Russ, what's wrong? Did I do something? All he wanted was to walk to the closet, put on as many clothes as he could get away with, and go for a long walk. Without Autumn. Doing his best to smile, he turned to her, hands still holding the towel in place. No, baby, you haven't done anything wrong. He put his free hand on her shoulder. I just know my breath stinks and I want to brush my teeth first. She held his gaze for a moment before her face softened. Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't Ellen. He blinked twice and then grinned for real. I plan on asking her. We talked about that. Autumn nodded with a knowing smile. Yes, we did, and I'm still up for that. I just want to make sure my man isn't running away. The disgust he'd felt earlier melted away. He leaned forward and kissed her for real, ignoring the pangs of revulsion. When they finished, he saw her hand drifting toward his crotch. He moved to the side and faked a hard cough. Using it as an excuse, he turned away from her and to the closet. He pulled out his only pair of pants, his long-sleeved sunshirt, and his loosest pair of underwear. Russ stepped into them as quickly as he could, his back to her the entire time. What are you wearing? She asked. Without turning, he slipped on the pants and buttoned his shirt. Just don't feel like fighting the sun today, is all. Look at me, she said softly. Russ turned, half expecting to see anger in her face. Instead, she looked concerned. Baby, are you sure you're okay? While dressing, the feeling of revulsion at her voice had returned. Now it melted again. God, she loved him. He still loved her. Didn't he? He manufactured the most genuine smile he could and stepped to her. I'm okay, honey. Just want some cover, that's all. She touched his chest before burying her head in it. If you're sure. I am. He ran his hands through her hair, his fingers caressing the nape of her neck. As he closed in to kiss her, her scent lit his nose. Instead of allure and desire, he felt disgust. She smelled wrong in the same way that Ellen smelled right. He forced himself to kiss her once before pulling back slightly. She kissed his chest and stepped backward, eyes bored into his. If you're still sick, I'll go see the quack if I feel ill, he nodded. I know, things are okay. You'll see. He walked out of the bathroom and into the main room. Where are you going? She asked. West Beach, maybe. I'll let Angela drop me off. Autumn pursed her lips as if she were considering something. How about I join you in an hour or two? Sounds fine. I'll be by the ocean sipping Mai Tais or napping. In this heat? She asked. You'll take your clothes off just to cool down, unless you're going to walk into the ocean. Russ chuckled and waved to her. I'll be fine. See you in a while. The moment he walked outside the bungalow, the tension in all his muscles relaxed, and he finally felt as though he could breathe. But why was he tense? Because he didn't want her to know? She doesn't need to know, the familiar voice said. No one does. He tapped his band and waited for Angelo to appear. A few minutes later, the cart stopped in front of the bungalow, and he climbed in. Ellen watched Bill sleep for nearly half an hour while her stomach gurgled and her insides writhed like live snakes. Standing in the bathroom doorway, she felt like some kind of interloper, or perhaps a guard dog. But guard dogs didn't consider running out on their masters. Since she returned to the bungalow, that strange voice had been muttering the same thought over and over. Get to the water. Why the water? But the voice had no answer to that question. If it was her subconscious, it wasn't playing fair. Tell me what to do, but not why. What am I, a little kid? Get to the water. She opened her mouth to say something aloud and stopped. She'd almost told the voice to go fuck itself, but it had a point. The ocean would feel good against her skin, and she didn't have to go far out to clothe herself with the water and hide her loins. No one would bat an eye if she went to the lagoon while wearing her clothes. Would they? No, they wouldn't. Besides, the only people she'd likely run into were Russ and Autumn. She'd still need a valeted driver, though. She stared down at the wristband and smiled. Nicholas would be here in a flash, assuming he wasn't busy on another part of the island. But even if he were, one of the other valets would appear. Mina or Angelo would work just as well. She regarded her outfit again and decided she'd bring a change of clothes. After loading her day pack with undies, a fresh pad, her other pair of sunpants, and a long tee, she waited for Bill's snores to ratchet up to chainsaw levels. It didn't take long. Sure he was asleep, she walked to the door, grimaced at the noise it made, and stepped outside into the warm ocean air. She stared at the button on her wrist again, decided she could walk, and headed west.